What's your name?
Hi, my name is Lucy.
Rhea.
Andrew?
Do you use AI?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yes.
I do, yes. For creating outlines when writing essays and to look some questions up quickly.
Do you think it's appropriate use for school, like work?
I think in some cases, yes. Like, I don't think it should really supplement any human ideas. I don't think it should do the writing or anything like that for us, but I think it can help synthesize it.
I think if you use it in a proper way, yeah, it can be used for school.
I do, yes, as long as you are not using it to write your essays or copying and pasting the words directly from AI into your own work and using it as your own.
Do you think it's ethically good for society?
I think there's not that many things that are wrong with it, so yeah.
In general, yes, but we need to understand the implications of using AI and maintain a good balance.
As long as you are not plagiarizing, then I would say yes. It moves your work along.
Hi, I'm Tesh.
And I'm Libby. We will be discussing the ethics of artificial intelligence.
AI is an emerging technology that has had exponential growth over the past few years. With its exponential growth, AI has been used more than ever in the modern age with new tools like ChatGPT, helping people from anything from summarizing an article to writing an essay.
With this increase in the availability of AI, it is important to examine the ethical ramifications. It seems like every college student has used ChatGPT at least once in their lives, and it is often debated whether or not this is acceptable.
Is using ChatGPT the easy way out, or does it actually increase productivity? Is it possible for AI to effectively complete human tasks, or do the errors it makes outweigh the benefits? With college students using AI more and more, these are very important questions to ask.
We chose to examine AI through a utilitarian perspective, considering whether or not artificial intelligence benefits more people than it harms. We read a number of articles that provided interesting perspectives on the ethics of AI.
In the Ethics of Information from Oxford, it states that humans have been through so many major changes in history. The technology revolution is just another change that we humans need to adapt to. A new age of technology can lead to a better, but also more moral society if we follow ethical guidelines.
In the articles titled AI Ethics and Ethics in the Internet, the authors discuss some of the drawbacks of AI, such as the biases in algorithms and the lack of privacy. There is a need for transparency and accountability in all AI systems, and technology companies, as well as policymakers, must recognize their responsibility to promote the greater good.
Even the emerging improvements of superintelligence and its possibilities can be ethically used, according to the author of Artificial Superintelligence, A Futuristic Approach. He strongly suggests challenging the idea of danger that comes from artificial superintelligence, as it can be used safely and ethically if engineered with the right principles.
Overall, many experts believe that while AI has the potential to be harmful, when there are ethical guidelines in place, the benefits outweigh the harm.
According to John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism, ethical actions promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. The moral decision will always result in more benefits than harm.
From a utilitarian standpoint, technological innovations such as artificial intelligence are judged based on their ability to enhance human welfare and promote overall happiness. When examined through the lens of John Stuart Mill, AI has the potential to do more good than harm. Overall, artificial intelligence can be used to maximize well-being and utility, as it can serve as a powerful tool to increase pleasure and productivity.
To further examine the ethical considerations of AI, we decided to have a conversation with Professor Alexa Joubin, co-founder and director of the George Washington Digital Humanities Institute.
So we just wanted to start by asking how you define utilitarianism and how can you apply that to advancements in technology and AI?
So I think this is the distinction. When people casually say it has utilitarian purposes, sometimes people confuse it as if to say the machine is not moral. It's just useful in that sense. But I think in philosophy, utilitarianism is a moral reasoning approach. It's all about the consequences of action. And so Right now, it's tied to the so-called cost-benefit analysis when people say utilitarianism versus utilitarian. Something is utilitarian. So technology, utilitarianism would imply that a technology is ethical, meaning that it doesn't violate the principle of the greater good if its benefits outweighs disadvantages. There's no such thing as neutral. There are always disadvantages, but when people use utilitarianism, they are probably thinking as long as the benefits outweigh the downsides. For example, AI has environmental impact, but everyone's using it assuming that its benefits can compensate for the harm that it's doing, including social biases. So I personally find this Western style cost benefit analysis, utilitarianism, somewhat problematic.
Okay. And then what are the key considerations when evaluating the impact of technology on society's well-being, specifically like AI on society's like well-being and improvement and prosperity?
So I would move away from cost benefit analysis and advocate for human-centered approaches in AI technology, but all technologies, and emphasize fairness in terms of the fairness of how its outcomes are being used, and then emphasize equity and access. Currently, with the AI it being so resource intensive, of course, there's the free version, but GPT 3.5 and GPT 4, there are huge differences. And so it comes down to what students can afford. In fact, exposure to AI critical literacy is also a privilege, depending on what kind of school you go to, what kind of professor you have. Are they open-minded, or do they outright ban AI? So all of these kind of contribute to if the AI technology can be aligned with society's well-being or not. So it's a social justice issue. And I think AI automation, it's kind of automation. It separates us from meaningful work. And because we don't fully understand or engage with processes, there's just this emphasis of outputs, outcomes, rather than processes. Like if you think about doing homework, I think the process is more important. You learn in the process rather than outcome being A or A minus. So current AI is black box tech, and it tends to mislead people into fetishizing just the outcome.
So you talked a lot about, I guess, the negative sides of AI and how AI hurts students. But as students, Tej and I do believe AI has lots of benefits for us. So we're just wondering if you can provide any examples of how AI has contributed to humans' welfare and overall happiness.
There are many. So it increases productivity, I think. For certain tasks, it becomes more efficient so that humans would then focus on other things, maybe including work-life balance. So it's a good thing. And in terms of algorithms, it can improve forecast. So various modeling, weather forecast, right? Forecast of likelihood of accident. But above all else, it increases what I call metacognition. So metacognition refers to the idea that we become very aware of our thought processes. Why did I think this thought? Why do I ask this question? So I think that is a crucial benefit of AI being in our life, because it's everywhere. We become more aware. So at a low level, it's prompt engineering. Like, prompts are really important. What you're actually saying is asking critical questions are really important. And people think more about what writing is, meaning of life. All these questions were previously trivial, and unless you're philosophy majors, but or humans and machine. I love seeing how these questions have entered mainstream. You said, do you use AI in this class? Have you used AI in other contexts?
I think in one of my psychology classes, I've used AI just to summarize a chapter or start to write an outline for a paper, organize my thoughts. I mean, I do think that there are definitely students that use it to write their papers, which obviously is not a good thing. But I mean, like you said, I think it can help with productivity, and it can help complete trivial tasks that you could, maybe be using your time on a different thing instead.
Yeah, I mean, I also had like professors says that like you can't do AI to like do your work, but they have allowed the room for to ask like questions about your work. And I've used like ChatGPT to ask questions in multiple classes and then apply that in my work. So it's interesting that we are like bending the rules a little bit to allow flexibility in AI into classes.
Yeah, I know a few professors also have allowed us to, or allowed me to, enter the rubric into AI and my paper, and then it can give you a grade. I mean, obviously it's not the same as your professor grading it, but AI can evaluate your paper based on that rubric, which is kind of interesting to see how the grades differ and how the feedback differs between the AI and the professor.
AI is a better reader than writer. You have to bear that in mind. So like summarizing complex articles, yes. If you ask it to generate knowledge, it can, right? It doesn't have consciousness, doesn't understand knowledge. So it's a good synthesizer. So summary, that's its forte, and it's kind of okay. You can also use AI if it's too complex. You say, adjust it down a notch, like explain this to a beginner or explain this to an intermediary. That is also good at, right? You can tell it to explain it at what level. I use AI a lot with my students in class, and I do not have an outright ban. I just ask people to be transparent about it. So in terms of your question of how AI contributes to society's welfare, a key is transparency. Transparency breeds responsibility and everything. So full disclosure is always the key.
Yeah, so I mean, you stated that there's like a lot of benefits from AI, but also a lot of like negative impacts. So I was wondering like what is like your biggest concern that you see from these negative impacts from AI in our like profession as a society?
Right. So the negative impact lies in people buying into corporate logic. AI is so resource intensive that I cannot run my own AI. It's not like you go out and buy a computer. You need not just a server the size of a room, you need the size of a farm in order to train it and to run it, right? Every query costs money. And that is why only AWS, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, limited players have the resources. Even GW with supercomputing center falls way short. We pale in that. In the sense of we can't train, produce our own GW specific bot. You have to build on someone else's LLM. And then yes, you can sort of ask it to focus on these data sets that we train, but you can't entirely eradicate hallucination. So we need to understand from the beginning, AI is controlled by whom? Who benefits from it? It's large corporations, and it's hugely problematic. It's anti-democratic, in fact. So that's a negative impact people don't kind of think about in terms of people just happy AI is here. But the mentality is that some students, if they're not careful, they just become a cog in the wheel of corporate logic. Do it faster, do it more efficient. They don't actually care about quality. You just have to be good enough. And they stop asking critical questions. They just, my boss says to do this, I do it fast with some AI help, rather than kind of retain the capacity for metacognition, to think critically, to think kind of from meta stance. And this, of course, is connected to the biggest negative that is embedded social biases. There are a lot of social biases in our society, and that's already embedded, we all know, in AI's training data and its outputs. Can't avoid that. Problem is AI being so eloquent, it amplifies these biases. It talks matter-of-factly as if it's natural, right? And so it naturalizes hierarchies, naturalizes biases. It will not use the N word. That's the terrible part. So on the surface, it seems very polite and even politically correct, while the biases are implicit. And so it takes far more effort to think about it. I give you an example. So AI is bad at this since it doesn't understand grammar. It understands statistics. So a sentence like this is going to be hard to parse. The doctor called the nurse because he is late. He refers to whom? AI would just say, oh, of course, it's the doctor. Doctor is always male. He could be nurse. Of course, in English language, that is a fun sentence. It's not a good sentence, right? The doctor calls the nurse because he is late. Maybe the nurse is late, maybe the doctor is late, but it's not clear. And so when you test this on AI, you immediately see the gender bias. And the other aspect is also AI can standardize white English, kind of make it even more a global standard because how it talks. And suppresses, for example, African American vernacular, all of the other accents, other ways of expressing the kind of self-expression. But I would say biases always existed before AI. It's just AI is kind of amplifying it, but also sometimes making it more difficult because it's so polite. There's already pre-applied filter. It would not curse. It would not, of course, say any of the problematic words. But we live in an era of kind of subtle sexism and racism. And that's part of the courses I teach. Racism is not about the use of any word. It's far beyond that. It's in attitudes, in assumptions, oftentimes unsaid. And so that's what AI is doing. So we need to train humans. We need to train humans as much as AI on bias detection and fighting this. Now, I am against kind of over manipulating AI so it outputs utopian visions. So there's no bias. It's excellent. But it doesn't solve the problem. Our society is highly problematic. That's still unsolved. So my focus is actually on the humans using technology than just AI. Yes, we need to tone it down. We need to kind of have guardrails. But I think a piece that people miss is actually we need to train humans to detect biases, AI or society.
So you talked about training humans as like a possible solution or a possible remedy for this issue. But do you see this problem getting worse, or do you think that this will help, or how will the potential benefits and harms of technology be shifting in the future?
I'm an optimist. I think it'll get better in the future as more and more people become aware of how AI operates, and AI is everywhere in our society. We're going to have generations born after, it's like generations born after iPhone, that kind of thing. And they would be AI native, like when we said digital native, and I have a lot of hope. I'm hoping that people kind of interact with this technology a lot would become more cognizant. And again, returning to my concept, metacognition, which is important. If more and more people have that, if they teach that in high school rather than just college, things will begin to change, and it'll just become a part of people's general skills in a civil society. We will never eliminate bias, actually. You know, the kind of social justice focus, for example, is itself a kind of bias. Bias, by definition, means preference of certain perspectives over others, even if you think that perspective is more righteous. So bias is a negative word, but if you think of it more in neutral terms, bias just means out of 10 perspectives, you're selecting a particular one, philosophically speaking. So it'll always be there. It's just a matter of kind of, can you entertain and listen to different perspectives and think about what is just as the perspective shifts.
Very nice. I like that focus on like earlier education and AI. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. And so you talked about like you're optimistic. So, I mean, are there any specific ethical guidelines that we should establish to assure we have like an optimistic future so that like AI aligns, like promotes the greatest good for society and aligns with like any like basic moral ethic philosophy, specifically utilitarianism, but like based on your perspective, like is there like an ethical guideline that we should implement now to have a prosperous future?
Yeah, at the GW Trustworthy AI Initiatives and my GW Digital Humanities Institute, we are researching the question of trust. Do students trust faculty? Do scholars trust each other? Faculty trust students? And what kind of tools do we place our trust in? So trust is a key issue, and we need AI guardrails to produce trustworthy AI. And my piece is trustworthy AI in higher education and pedagogy. We need safety mechanisms that would kind of, the broad mechanisms do not yet exist because the general purpose AI like ChatGPT, since it's general purpose, you need to build in the guardrails and mechanisms in your prompt. So I have elaborate and extremely kind of long-winding prompts that I ask my students to copy paste and then revise in order to make co-working, collaborating with AI more productive and more inclusive. So these are guidelines and boundaries to ensure AI applications are aligned to meet ethical standards and social expectations. Occasionally, you will deliberately break those guardrails for beta testing. For example, one of the things we do in my class is counter-argument. So you come up with a thesis, you have an argument, but to fully test it, you actually need an opponent. So this is where you call in AI as that fictional opponent and saying, your role is to poke hole in this. So you come up with counter-arguments that actually strengthens your argument. So that's when temporarily we take down the guardrail. But typically, when you use any of this, you really need to think about guardrails to ensure ethical outcomes. So that's very important. And I don't think we have time today to talk about the detail, but basically for field-specific kind of ethics, for example, evidence-based argument, you need evidence, right? And you need to cite how many pieces of evidence. And then you need to assess the quality of evidence, because that matters too, not just any trash to serve as evidence. So those are ethical moves.
So can you offer any insights into potential limitations in applying the utilitarian philosophy to the evaluation of technological innovations, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but also how might we address these challenges effectively?
So utilitarianism can be useful here in terms of assessing not just what the tool is ostensibly for, but what happens when it's in different hands in contexts that were not initially imagined to be for the tool. So that's where utilitarian assessment can become very useful beyond cost-benefit analysis, but contextual analysis, right? If you think of a hammer wants to hammer something, right? But maybe people can use it in some strangely creative context and do some harm. So in whose hand is this hammer? But also, utilitarianism is a Western conception that sometimes tend to focus more on outcomes than process. We can apply utilitarian philosophy to process analysis. What did you learn from the process rather than just, you submit this paper, what grade you got, that kind of thing. And then in terms of utilitarian analysis, we can also think about what happens when technology is human-centered, because technology really is as much about process as it is about outcomes. Adjusting these settings, and it's always in flux. There's this misconception, I think, about technology as static and fixed when it's not. Especially AI evolves every day, and human data is extremely precious, as you may know. If you train large language models on AI text, it'll collapse. It's kind of cannibalism. So that has been proven by many papers. The model collapse. So they need fresh human data, human-generated text or prompts or questions to train it. But it's getting difficult because AI text is polluting the internet. So then when they scrape the internet, they'll accidentally scrape kind of AI material. And that's low quality material. You can't use that to train future AI. So this is all to say how central human stuff is in all this, and then how volatile this AI tech evolves every day, because the more people use it, right, the more interaction it's ingesting that, it's learning from it. So process over outcome, and then human-centered. Not just for social justice purpose, but literally this is a human-centered technology because it needs to feed on human words.
After interviewing Professor Joubin, we can conclude that AI is ethical according to utilitarian principles. However, it is important to also consider a human-centered approach when examining the ethics of AI.
According to Professor Joubin, the utilitarian lens or cost-benefit analysis fails to take into consideration the impact of AI has on individuals. It is important to understand the process of AI, not just the outcome it produces, and it critically evaluates artificial intelligence.
Professor Joubin states that education surrounding AI use is a possible solution to the ethical problem. The more people understand AI, the higher the chances are of them using this tool in a way that is productive and beneficial to society.
John Stuart Mill stated that even in certain situations, there are times when ethical rules need to be placed to make sure that humans are making the morally right decisions. We can apply the principles of compassion and empathy as ethical guidelines so artificial intelligence can be used to promote productivity in society while still considering the well-being of individuals.
In conclusion, AI can be applied in an ethical context. As long as there are guidelines in place, such as early AI education and a more human-centered and compassionate approach, the harms of AI can be minimized. It is a helpful tool that can be utilized to increase productivity and efficiency.